Factoring algebraic expressions, special factoring. There are three types of expressions we can factorize in a special way. First is the difference of two squares. This is the square of a term minus the square of another term. So this can be factorized in a special way. Next is a perfect square trinomial. We know a perfect square trinomial because the first term is a perfect square, the last term is a perfect square, and the middle term is 2 times the product of the square roots of the first and the last term. So the square root of a squared is a, and the square root of b squared is b. So 2 times the product of their square roots is the middle term. And next is the sum or the difference of two cubes. We have the cube of a term plus or minus the cube of another term. These three expressions can be factorized by special factoring. Now let's factorize the difference of two squares. First, we open two brackets to factorize. Next, we put the first thing squared in each of the brackets. In this case, it is a. We write a in each of the brackets. Next, we put the second thing squared in the brackets, which is b in this case. And next, we alternate the signs. One of the brackets will be a positive and the other a negative. So this is how we factorize the difference of two squares. Next, we factorize a perfect square trinomial. To factorize a perfect square trinomial, first, we open two brackets. And in the first bracket, we put the first thing squared, which is the first term, in the brackets. In this case, it is a that is squared. We write a in each of the brackets. Next, we write the second thing squared, which is the last term, in the brackets. In this case, it is b that is squared. So write b in the brackets. And next, depending on what the sign here is, if the sign is a positive, we'll have positives in the brackets. And if the sign here is negative, we'll have negatives in the brackets. So this factorizes into a plus b times a plus b, which can be written as a plus b squared, and that is if the sign here is positive. And if the sign is negative, then it factorizes into a minus b times a minus b, which can be written as a minus b squared. So this is how we factorize the perfect square trinomial. Next, we factorize the sum or the difference of two cubes. Here we have a binomial times a trinomial. It factorizes into a binomial times a trinomial. So in the binomial brackets, we put the first thing cubed, which is a, in the brackets, and the second thing cubed, which is b in this case, in the brackets. And whatever the sign is here, if this is positive, we'll have a positive in this bracket. If it is negative, we'll have a negative in this bracket. So for the trinomial bracket, after we put the first thing cubed in this bracket, we are left with the square of the term. So we'll write the square of the term, a squared. And after we put the second thing cubed in this bracket, we are left with the square of the term. So we'll write it on this end, the square of the term. And in the middle, we'll write the product of the square roots of the two terms. The square root of a squared is a, and the square root of b squared is b. So the product of the square roots is what we write in the middle. And for the signs, if this is a positive, then this is going to be the opposite sign, which is negative. And if this is a negative, we'll have a positive. And on this side, this is always positive. So this is how we factorize the sum or the difference of two cubes. A binomial times a trinomial, and the signs, same sign as the expression in this bracket. And in this bracket, the opposite sign, and this is always positive. Now let's factorize some expressions. So let's factorize this expression. This is the difference of two squares, and we know that because 9 can be written as 3 squared, then we have x squared minus, and 16 can be written as 4 squared, and this is 3x in bracket squared minus 4 squared. Now we can see that this is the difference of two squares, and to factorize, we open two brackets. We put the first thing squared, which is 3x, in the brackets, so write 3x in the brackets. And then we put the second thing squared, which is 4, in the brackets, we write 4. Next, we alternate the signs. One is a positive, the other is a negative. And this is how we factorize the difference of two squares. Next, we factorize a perfect square trinomial. So this is a perfect square trinomial. We know that because the first term is a perfect square and the last term is a perfect square. 9 is equal to 3 squared. And the middle term is 2 times the product of the square roots of the first term and the last term. The square root of x squared is equal to x, and the square root of 9 is equal to 3. So the product of their square roots is 3x, and then 2 times the product of the square roots, 2 times 3x, is 6x. So the middle term is 2 times the product of the square roots of the first term and the last term. And this is how we know that it is a perfect square trinomial. So to factorize, we open two brackets, and in the brackets we put the first thing squared, which is the first term, in the brackets. So write x and x in this bracket. Next, we put the second thing squared, which is the last term, in the brackets. So what is squared is 3. 3 is squared, so write 3 in the brackets. And next, depending on what the sign is here, this is a negative, so we'll have negative in the brackets. So this can be written as x minus 3 squared. Next, we factorize the sum or the difference of two cubes. So this is the sum of two cubes, and we know this because it can be written as 2 to the power 3. So to factorize the sum of two cubes, we open two brackets. One is a binomial and the other is a trinomial. So in the binomial bracket, we put the first thing cubed in the brackets. In this case, it is x. And then the second thing, the next thing, or the second thing cubed in the brackets. We can see that it is 2 that is cubed. So write 2 in the brackets. And because this is a positive, we'll have a positive here. For the trinomial brackets, after we put the first thing cubed, we are left with the square of the term. So write x squared. And after we put the second thing cubed, we are left with the square of the term. So we'll write 2 squared, which is equal to 4. And in the middle, we have the product of their square roots, the square roots of the first term and the last term. So the square root of x squared is x, and the square root of 2 squared is 4, and the square root is 2. So we have 2x in the middle. So for the signs, since this is positive, this is going to be the opposite sign, which is negative, and this is always positive. So this is how we factorize this expression, the sum of two cubes. So we're going to have x plus 2 times x squared minus 2x plus 2 to the power 2 is 4. So this is our final answer. We cannot factorize this any further because this expression usually cannot be factorized further.